I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. My guest this week is Tom Ramsden.
I think there's a lot of codes and things that have been developed by the sneaker industry and some of the sporting giants around that, like ideas like the drop and limited edition and things, going back a long time. And there's no reason why when something like sneaker culture becomes kind of permeates, when there's a popular understanding of that some of those ideas in the way that market works can't be applied to anything.
Tom Ramsden is a progressive and strategic innovator with over 20 years of experience in driving growth and transforming businesses from the ground up. Currently, he serves as CEO of creative agency Sid Lee US. Previously, he served as the global brand marketing director at Adidas, where he instigated and oversaw several award-winning and commercially celebrated campaigns, including work for FIFA World Cup 2014. His work has earned him recognition in both Marketing Week's Top 100 and Marketing Magazine's Power 100 list. My interview with Tom Ramsden is coming right up. But first,
my dad works in B2B marketing, but I never really knew what that meant. Then one day my dad came by my school for career day and told everyone in my class he was a big ROAS man. Then he just kept saying things like, the bigger the ROAS, the better, over and over. My friends still laugh at me to this day. I think it means calculating a return on ad spend. One thing's for sure. I'll be known as the ROAS man's kid for the rest of my days. Why couldn't you just be a fireman or a lawyer? Why? You ruined my life, Dad.
Not everyone gets B2B, but LinkedIn has the people who do. And with ads on LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people based on job title, industry, likelihood to buy, and more. Start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Tom Ramsden, welcome to On Brand.
Hi, Nick. Thanks very much. That's quite a bio. I listen to it and go, wow, he sounds accomplished.
You've been to some places and done some things. So I think that is... That's definitely a big part of it. And certainly, we were talking before we started recording about your time at Adidas, and I was wringing my hands over whether or not to say Adidas or Adidas. And you talked about how when you were a kid, you said it Adidas, and many still do. And that really got me to thinking of this storied brand that you were fortunate enough to have such a relationship with. That was a brand that you knew as a kid. Talk about that experience of kind of being handed the keys of one of these great brands that many of us have grown up with.
Yeah, I mean, I think Adidas came to me through football. That's the sport that I love, and I've spent a lot of time working on both at Adidas and outside. And so that's probably the first connection to it. And then growing up as a teenager, getting really into trainers, or what we call sneakers in the US, and being passionate about that. And so obviously had a strong kind of affiliation and connection to the brand and its products. And through university in London, actually, I was working in a sneaker shop in Soho, and there was a gentleman called Gary that used to come in to the store who worked for Adidas and was looking for, rare sneakers that weren't always readily available for everybody. And I just kind of said, hey, can I have a job, please? I finished my degree soon. I'd love to get in. And he was very kind and fought for me to get an opportunity. And that was my first foray in 2001, basically working in this department called Trend Marketing and Non-Athletic Promotions. Basically, like I hate to say it, but influencer marketing really before there was social media. And then I was there for a quick stint, moved and left and did all kinds of different jobs in London, lived in Ecuador for a brief period, came back and worked for an agency in London, which was really connected to like sneakers and sneaker culture and streetwear and things. And Adidas was one of their clients. And eventually I got asked by my client, a guy called Thomas Seiler, to come over and replace him working on communications. And so it felt like a really amazing opportunity to move to Germany and work on an incredible brand, and genuinely like a privilege, like not many people get to do it. And so I took that responsibility pretty seriously and poured my heart and soul into it. And, there's a funny moment when you go like, oh, it's kind of like an obligation to live up to the past on brands like that, where you feel like it's a great opportunity and an obligation to do something, to try and do something that is, going to live on and be part of the legacy for those brands. So that was a very cool experience.
What you just said makes me think that it could really. I might have some analysis paralysis or paralysis of some sort between this is a brand that I'm excited about, that I've always loved. I want to do something big for it, but I don't want to hurt it either. So how did you square working on that brand, adding impact, but also preserving what's always been so special about it and its history?
Yeah, I think I was lucky enough to have a pretty good understanding of the brand. And I think that's been the case on a lot of the companies that I've worked with, and even here and now at Sid Lee, is kind of understanding the DNA, if you like, of the brand, of the company, and being able to like continue to add to that and build on it. Like in the example of Sid Lee, in my current role, is trying to continue to live up to the Sid Lee brand in many ways in the work that we do. So it's an honor, and it's kind of an obligation. There becomes some pressure to that, but if you have a good sense of the identity and the brand, then I think it becomes if it's intuitive, then it makes it a bit easier.
Well, you talked about your work at Sid Lee, and I think the other interesting part of your story there is both being inside at Adidas, where you were working with folks at Sid Lee, and then getting leaving Adidas for Sid Lee for another company that you were close to. So talk a bit about that career navigation of being shifting from brand side to agency side.
Yeah, it's funny. So I've done it. Like I've had 3 stints at Adidas. Over what was almost 20 years. In fact, it was 20 years. The in between those chapters was stints in creative companies in London and in Portland and with Sid Lee. And I guess for me, it's that difference between the roles that I was in on the corporate side, where you're acting as a marketer and thinking about everything, versus acting as a creative kind of developer. And I think I've always straddled the line, which is probably that's why I think it's reflected that way in my career, is going between the two. When I was critical, I think, in maybe choosing or gravitating towards the kind of creative companies that I wanted to work with or would consider, Sid Lee's on a pretty short list along with the other 2 that I've been at before, because it's about, what's the word here? Like finding like-minded people who are human and have a bit of ambition and endeavor and want to think differently and create something new. And so that's kind of how I ended up there, I think, with being able to apply more of my time to creative development, I suppose, and developing something, versus the more, let's call it, brand management side of things.
Well, and as we talk a bit about that on the brand management side of things, I guess I will inadvertently keep it with the footwear theme, with certainly the space being dominated by the Adidas, the Nikes of the world. But you've done some remarkable work recently for my personal favorite footwear, and that is Allbirds. This is mercifully for me an audio podcast, so no, everyone is spared the visual aids of the dozen or so pair of various Allbirds that I have for different days, different seasons, different activities. But this is one of my favorite things. But it's been a challenging few years for the brand with the pandemic and other things. I wondered if you'd talk a bit about navigating this growth for a brand like Allbirds.
Yeah, I mean, working with Allbirds has been a great pleasure this year with our clients, both Kelly Olmsted, who's the CMO, and Adrian Nyman, who leads design. And they truly have a vision for Allbirds and what they want to build that we've been able to work with them on and help to sharpen and refine. An incredible, brand with a huge amount of credibility when it comes to sustainability, obviously. And were in many regards pioneers, not just in the way that they developed those things, but in the way that they kind of open sourced some of it in many regards to the whole industry. So true leaders in that regard. And, with that came a lot of followers and other people into the market behind them, which I think, without being an expert exactly on all of their business, is where they found themselves. So they've been talking about, reconnecting to the DNA and what makes them what's true to them, both in their product and as a brand. They've talked about having kind of, high power and low ego. And I think that's kind of a fit also with Sid Lee, frankly, and us trying to articulate that in the latest kind of campaign and platform around Allbirds by Nature speaks to, the duality, if you like, of both the natural world and their commitment to sustainability, but also the idea of being true to yourself and your authentic person. So that's been a great experience, and we're excited about the work that we just put out.
On Brand, we'll be right back after this.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Hennika Watkis-Porter hosts The Entrepreneurial You, empowering entrepreneurs with insights on leadership, business, and success. Hennika, tell listeners what to expect from your show.
So we provide innovative business strategies and practical solutions to common entrepreneurial challenges.
And where can people subscribe?
Find us at hennikawatkisporter.com, as well as the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcasts.net, or search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Now, back to the show. So when you talk about high power, low ego, I'm fascinated by that definition. Was that a direction that they self-professed, or one that you strategically found together?
No, I think it came from a conversation, actually. And I don't remember the exact origin of it, but I think it was Kelly who had talked about her joining the company, and someone had said that that's what you'll find here, like this idea of high power, low ego. And, our team, they felt that was a good articulation of the culture of the company. And, our team helped to kind of jump on that and build on it a little bit and go, yeah, that's a great, how do we, if that's the truth about the brand and the company, let's build on it and help to articulate it further. That's definitely it's definitely like a kind of an Allbirds creation, let's say, of that idea.
So how might someone navigating that kind of search for redefinition approach? I mean, because a lot of times we go for the big flashy rebrands, but with this, it's very much of a return to kind of who they've always been at their best. But how do you know what path is best to go down as you look at navigating brand growth?
I'd love to tell you, Nick, that there's like a one single process for that. I think lots of different organizations have this kind of like the magic, these are the steps to solving the solution. I don't really believe that the kind of almost the factory approach to it really works, but there's a lot of different skills, techniques, approaches, analyses that you can do to help inform what you think is the right piece. But I do think you need to read the situation differently, depending on both the brand and the company and the business, the cultural context, all of it. So you try to get a really good read of the lay of the land completely and understand, of course, what the objectives is and the ambition, then start to tie some of these things together in a way which doesn't, I would say, which builds on the DNA of the brand, of what's true to it, where there's equity, find something that's still distinct from the competition and ultimately something that's particularly relevant to the audience that you're trying to reach and engage. And when you find the sweet spot of those three things, then I think you find something that's very valuable.
So that's such an important point too, kind of finding that that sweet spot, and you've certainly found that in lots of work through the years. As you look back, is there a favorite either brand side or client side success story of brand innovation that's one of your favorites to share?
Oh man. Well, there's so many. Where do we start? No, I would say there's a couple of things. I should speak to the Sid Lee things that we have done together. And in 2007 or 8, roughly, we started working on Adidas Originals and what became a campaign called House Party, which, if you were close to the industry, certainly at that time you would know about, and it definitely had a big cut through. The impact of that was one of the ones where there was a strategic approach to the way that we thought about the consumer and the way that we thought about our marketing budget, frankly, as well as an amazing creative output from the team that worked on it at Sid Lee at the time that came together to create something pretty special. And actually what happened at that time, so 2008, 2009, of course, huge, the economic crisis, but the category of originals at Adidas at that time actually grew, got double-digit growth as a result, which obviously is exceptional results at the time. So that was a proud moment for me, and certainly, Sid Lee as well, I think, because it wasn't just great creative, it was genuinely transformational.
So, as you talk about work like that is transformational, I feel like we're also in a unique time in which work that we do that is, strategic brand work designed to produce a business result can pretty easily, as you've certainly done in the way of sneakers and sports, become part of the zeitgeist culturally. Is that something that a brand can aim for, or is it more of a happy accident, a byproduct that can happen but doesn't always?
Great question. I mean, there's a lot of, I don't think I have the definitive answer on that. Of course, I couldn't profess to, but I can see so many different parts of the argument. My colleague in London, Rory, who leads the strategy there, is a big believer that, brands don't really create culture. I think there's a strong argument there, but I can see the other side of it, which is actually they're a huge contributor to culture at the same time. The sneaker industry is a bit of an odd one, I think, because sneakers were part of cultures, right? This is an old friend of mine who sadly passed away called Gary Warner, had this kind of great thing that stuck with me that was around sneakers were part of cultures all over, whether it's breakdancing or hip hop or terrace culture or whatever. And then at some point they kind of became a culture in itself. And that is an interesting, just thought of what that means and then what sneaker culture became, which is very, very different of course, to what it was, 15, 20 years ago, or even 40 years ago and beyond. I don't know if that's a good answer. A bit of an abstract answer, isn't it, Nick? Sorry.
No, I think it's a great one, and especially when you consider kind of the larger category. And I think that's what my perhaps clumsy question was alluding to. Also, is that especially when you look at the category of sneakers, I think that certainly has maybe greater pathway, greater road to cultural cachet than perhaps other industries. I always feel like the other side of that are people that say, when there are so often cool things done by sneaker brands, you've got some, B2B brands who might perceive themselves as more boring, saying, oh, well, that's great
Yeah.
for Adidas, but we couldn't do that, which in some cases is true, but I don't think is always the case. I think it's, while you may not be a sneaker brand in that space per se, I think there's a way that you can use some of those elements and create similar connections.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of codes and things that have been developed by the sneaker industry and some of the sporting giants around that, like ideas like the drop and limited edition and things, going back a long time. And there's no reason why a lot of those things, they become kind of the language, the vernacular, the codes and the behaviors that people get used to if you live in those worlds and you're closely connected. And there's no reason why, when something like sneaker culture becomes kind of permeates and goes past a threshold of being, when there's a popular understanding of that some of those ideas in the way that I don't want to call it like culture, but the way that market works can't be applied to anything from like insurance to alcohol to, all sorts of other things. And I think you do see that, but it's not just, of course, I'm not suggesting that sneaker culture is the pervasive thing in terms of influence, but I do like the idea of being able to take all kinds of different areas that are pioneering and create new ways of people experiencing the world and bringing them across different industries and categories and everything else. Yeah, and just look at like the way, what did I see yesterday? Watching the WNBA and the kind of, I can't remember the exact term for it. It's like the fit walk maybe, where now what was this kind of social commentary on, oh, look what the athletes are wearing, and now we're checking out people's fits, and then they play up to that, and then it becomes this kind of almost catwalk or showcase moment. Now is like an official part of programming that I think one of the major brands is behind in the WNBA. And becomes a bit of a phenomenon that way. So it's interesting.
No, I think that's a great example too of the kind of interdependent relationship between brands, culture, and the fit walk. Literally, kind of walking that line, as it were. Well, that example certainly made me smile, which means that it is time for me to ask you, Tom, for a brand that has made you smile recently.
What do I like? I mean, the one that came to my mind is Jacquemus. This isn't like super recent, but maybe earlier on in the year, when this trend of these large fake product kind of, let's say, augmented reality pieces of content were appearing everywhere. Like here's whatever, I think we saw some makeup which kind of started it. I suppose that was Maybelline, and then we see other brands with ginormous products on landmarks, and then Jacquemus did a version with some of their bags that weren't created digitally, that were actually pretty larger than life and going through Paris, I think, in real. And I was like, they have nailed it, because I was already sick of seeing these fake virtual ones and these kind of like people pretending to be blown away as if these alien oversized products have landed on landmarks. And then they were like, you know what? We'll just do it for real. Check this out. And I just remember seeing that and going, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So hats off to them.
I love it. Great example, great smile. Tom, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Great. Well, I would suggest checking out sidlee.com. There's a great overview of all of our work. And of course, you can find me and the company on LinkedIn.
Awesome. We will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can find at onbrandpodcast.com. Tom Ramsden, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thanks, Nick.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.